Hey everybody, Katie and Claudia back at you with another live broadcast. Today's a product spotlight on some of our favorite markers. You've been having a lot of fun playing with these, right? So what are you going to show us today?
Well, I think the most asked question is probably what is the difference between Spectrum Noir alcohol markers and Spectrum Aqua markers, and kind of what are you going to use each for? What paper do you use? What's the difference? Do I need both of them? We see a lot of those questions, so I'm kind of just going to give you some bullet points on both of the markers and what makes them different from one another, excuse me, and what how to use them.
Okay, perfect. So if you guys have any questions throughout, I'll be checking out the comments. I'll let Claudia know, and just let us know who's here in the comments and if you're liking these broadcasts every day.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into it.
Okay,
What's first?
First I'm going to tell you a little bit about what alcohol markers are, just in general. So alcohol markers are really popular and well known in artist circles. They're used a lot for illustration, for blending in illustration, and but they're not just for artists, or fine artists, I should say. There's a lot of different uses for them. They're easily blendable, so they're great for card making because you can blend several shades together. They're also good for coloring flat areas of color. So I'm going to show you here. So for example, you can use the marker to color just flat color like you would when you were a kid in school.
These are the stamps I use with Miles.
Yes, I remember he loves them. He loves dinosaurs. So you can just use it to create flat color like that. Or what's awesome about the way that these Spectrum Noirs are sold is that they're sold in these giant packs like this, but they also come in pre-curated sets for you that have all the shades of one color. So for example, like all the shades of blue, and they're numbered like BT1, BT2, so that you can easily blend colors.
So how does that numbering system work? Is it in order of like lightest to darkest?
Exactly. So the one is the lightest all the way up to the darkest. They're sold in sets of 6, I believe. Mm-hmm. And for example, this pack here is the Turquoises. So you can see that you can color in a flat area of color like this.
And I notice there's not streaking going on.
Right, there's no streaking. It's really smooth coverage. And I'll touch on that a little bit. So it looks great, it's fun, vibrant, but if you want to go in there and actually create more depth.
This is the next color?
Yeah, this is, so you can start to create that kind of depth in there. So that's what's really great, is that it's for, accessible for like a wide range of artists. If you're a beginner, if you are more intense in your card making or in your illustrations and you want to create lots of highlights and shadows, these are great for that as well.
So for doing that and the highlighting and shadowing, do you need to kind of have an eye for where the light's going to fall, or can you just kind of guess?
Usually you just pick a side. So for example, if you imagine that your light source is over here on this side, then everything on the opposite side is going to be the shadow, and everything that the light touches will be slightly lighter. And what's great is that because they've already kind of created the set for you of light to dark, you literally just go in number order. So you can create as little or as much shadow as you want, and it's really foolproof. You don't need to know color theory or any of that. It's already all set for you. And as you had mentioned before, what's really awesome about, so alcohol markers, they're made of a suspension of dye in alcohol. So because if you've ever you cut yourself and you put alcohol on your skin, you know that it what am I trying to say? I lost my word. It evaporates very quickly. Yes, sorry, it evaporates really quickly. So because it's dye and alcohol in a marker, the alcohol is going to evaporate, so it makes it really fast drying.
Okay.
So this is already dry. Like you're not gonna
smear it.
You're not gonna smear it. It's already dry. And also, they have blenders that you can use that are also made with an alcohol solution. So you can see how smooth it is, but if you did have a little bit of streaking, you would just go in with the blender and kind of work any of those lines out so that you aren't left with any of those obvious lines.
Very cool.
So that's what the blender is for.
Quick question. These are dual tipped, right?
Yes.
Are you going to get into that?
Yeah. So
Does it matter how you store them?
I've seen most dual tip markers stored horizontal.
This though, it's a trick question. I knew the answer to this. It's actually a double barrel marker, I believe.
Yes,
so they each have their own chamber. So you can store it whichever way you want and not worry about the ink drying up.
And that's a good point because these are also refillable. So if one side has run out, you can actually refill these
So you only have to invest in the set once, and then
Correct.
you can refill them.
Yes, but to your point, I will show you actually what these two sides look like. So there's the broad tip that can also do thinner lines depending on how you're going to angle it. And then there's the bullet point tip that's kind of a finer tip with more consistent, smaller line, thinner lines.
Very nice.
So yeah, so we talked about the dual tip. They're non-toxic. And then I just wanted to touch a little bit about what paper to use with these as opposed to the Aquas. So the best paper for alcohol markers is a smooth, thick cardstock. If you want kind of, like you can see right away how smooth that is. Mm-hmm. You can use it with watercolor paper, but if you mess with texture, it might pick up a little bit of that texture. It's all about preference, but you can't fail with a smooth
surface,
thick cardstock. So that's what I like to use. They're also permanent, so you can use them on more than one surface as long as it's non-porous surfaces. So you can use it on paper, metal, wood, fabric. And so it's great for mixed media artists because you can layer a bunch of different mediums together.
Would it go through the paper in, say, an adult coloring book?
Yes.
Okay.
They don't warn you against it, but they say they tend to bleed through. So you definitely want to test it out. Alcohol markers will definitely, for the most part.
So they're not a good marker for your planner.
No.
Because it's going to bleed through, probably.
Yeah, you can see how on this paper it bled through. So that just has something to do with the composition of the alcohol and the dye. It's not meant to sit on top like that, so it's gonna soak through all the way to the bottom.
Got it.
So so these are, but to that point, sorry, I know this is a lot of information being thrown at you. To that point, I'll show you when you're using a water-based marker, you can come across the issue of the paper pilling or kind of like wearing down, and that's because there's so much water in that marker. This won't do that. Okay. So alcohol-based markers, even if you layer color on top of color, you're not going to get that kind of pilling or rubbing off of the surface of your paper.
I think there's a couple people saying that they can't hear. I just was peeking over. Just make sure you're clicked into the video and turned all the way up. I think other people have said they can hear us, so we'll talk really loud too to make sure.
Yes, just to make sure. But so just really, I'll recap. So in a recap, alcohol markers are, as they're called, have alcohol and the dye ink in them. So they're very fast drying. They're great for blending. They come in sets that are already all set up for you so that you can start from lightest to darkest and you don't have to know anything about color theory. So yeah, they're non-toxic, refillable, dual tip. So that's what alcohol markers are.
Okay, so those are the Spectrum Noir alcohol markers that she just went through. You can get larger sets like this, the sets of 6. Do we have them as open stock too? Do you know? I can't remember.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I like the 6-packs personally because you can then layer them.
Yes, they're already set, and that's a great way to start. Or the big set. I was going to say it's
full set syndrome.
It's a great way to start because once you get used to working with all the different shades, then you can dive right into the big sets, and you're good to go.
So I'll let you move on to the Aquas, and I'll check on the comments to make sure we'll come back if there were any questions. But jump into the Aquas.
Okay. So the Aquas are a water-based marker. This is also a dual tip marker. It has more of a kind of like a brush tip as opposed to a flat chisel tip. And then the other side has a very, very fine bullet tip. And because they're water-based, they are water reactive, which means that you can use them as you would a watercolor. So, for example, I have an acrylic block here, and you can take any color that you'd like, and you just kind of scribble on this acrylic block here. And just with a little bit of water, it becomes essentially a watercolor, so that you can create watercolor washes. They blend really nicely. So it really does work like a watercolor would. These also will not bleed, so these won't bleed through most papers. You always want to test just to make sure, because there's always that anomaly that you don't want it to bleed through something that's really important to you. So you want to test it, but for the most part, these will not bleed through the way the alcohol markers do. So these are good for planners and coloring books and that kind of thing.
They're great for adding watercolor detail on cards too.
Yes.
I know our creative team member Chrissy did a full class video using these markers, so we'll have to make sure, we'll put that in the comments when we're done with this, but it's just really, really easy to add that watercolor touch using these markers. There's so many different watercolor mediums now, but it's fun when it's in marker form.
Definitely, because it's pretty easy cleanup, it's nicely contained for you. So as you were saying, Katie, like you can just kind of put two similar colors together and really create shading and shadows really easily. Like it looks like I took a long time to do that, and it's really just water and the markers that are kind of already all set for you in their color families.
It's good for traveling too, if you want to add some, if you like to craft on the go, if you're going on vacation or on a road trip, to bring the markers could be a little bit easier than like bringing your watercolor paints and your paintbrushes and all of that. Well, I guess you still need the brush.
But you can use a water brush. I chose to use a real paintbrush today, but these are great with water brushes. So if you're on the go, you can always bring along a water brush, and you don't have to worry about
having a cup of water or anything, because you could have it at least a little bit in the barrel.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to point out that you want to use watercolor cardstock with these markers because of the opposite effect that I was talking about. If you want to layer lots of color, you want a paper that's going to be able to withstand that water. Otherwise, it'll start to pill and kind of flake off if you just use a smooth cardstock.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So that was kind of, is that it?
That's kind of the
general
difference between water-based markers and alcohol-based. Also, it's almost exactly the opposite. So water-based are going to take longer to dry. They're not going to dry instantly. You might want to hit it with a heat gun if you're kind of crafting in need it to dry pretty quickly. You can hit it with a heat gun. But it will take a little longer to dry. Also, you want to use it only on porous surfaces as opposed to non-porous with the alcohol, because if it's non-porous, it will literally just sit there on top like water and not dry. So you want to make sure that it's something that's going to absorb the dye and the water.
I saw in the comments, I think it was Shirley, said she has the full set, so we've got more people with the full set syndrome here. It's like it's kind of hard because you start with a couple to see how you like it, and then you inevitably want the rest because you're like, ooh, I could do so much more with that. So lots of fun.
But I have a couple of techniques that I can show with the Aquas.
Perfect.
Because it's nice to kind of know what your options are when you're working, like you said, with so many water-based kind of watercoloring mediums. It's good to know what each one can do. So I know this is like a tried and true favorite technique that we have here at the office, which is to just...
Are you doing my favorite?
Yes. Which is to take several colors, different markers, and you're just going to randomly scribble on these, on the acrylic block. So you can just... And these are self-cleaning, meaning that you can't really contaminate them because they will write... So you can just write until the tip is clean, and you're not going to contaminate the colors.
Marie, while you're coloring your black, Marie is wondering if these two markers work well together. Is there ever an instance you would use them together, or would they be for separate projects?
I mean, I definitely feel that if you're going to work with them together, my instinct is to do the alcohol-based kind of layer first and then work with the water. If you're going to, let's say, stamp this dinosaur and you want to color the body with the alcohol markers but the face with water or something. So there's definitely, they would work great together, especially like we said for mixed media, just because they both work on almost complete opposite substrates. So what you can use the water ones on, you can't use the alcohol ones on, and the other way around. So I totally could see doing that.
Yeah,
I would just.
I like the idea of kind of doing the body. You know it's going to dry really fast with the alcohol, and then doing some details with the watercolor on the face.
Exactly. That's why I would do it in that order more, just because you know that's going to dry fast, and then when you add the water, it's going to take a little longer to dry. Okay, so you just kind of scribble on an acrylic block or like a page protector, or I've seen even people do craft mats.
A Ziploc bag even works for this technique.
You just spritz with water, and you're going to take your cardstock and just press it down, and you want to kind of rub to get all of that dye up, and you get this really cool effect that you can then just take a paper towel, kind of dab off the excess, and it comes out different every time. So
we try this technique with all of our markers because we love it. It's so much fun.
So depending on what colors you use, like this one I used even more colors, and you get more blended watercolor effect there. Also, I'll show you that this I already did, but you can stamp and emboss with clear embossing powder, just like you would normally, heating it with your heat tool. And then when you do a watercolor wash on top of it, it acts as a resist so that you create that cool effect.
That's awesome.
And one last one I have for you is this one here is another really cool effect. So all I did was create a wash.
The same way you did these? Or no, you painted that on?
You could paint it on, or you could do it that way. You just want it to be a little bit of a darker wash so that this technique shows up. So you're just going to literally take water and just drop it onto the watercolor wash. And then when you dab it with a paper towel, depending on how long you leave it on, it creates this like mottled splatter effect.
Fun. It's like a bleach effect almost.
Yes.
It's like bleaching. So Marie also asked, are these okay for kids? I would say these are non-toxic, so
they're non-toxic. Just obviously these are permanent, so you don't want it to get on anything,
walls,
or anything. These are, because they're water-based, they're much easier to clean up. So I would say if they're really little ones, I would maybe just work with them and work with the water-based ones.
I'm always like, Miles, those are mommy's markers.
Yes,
here's
yours. Those are people markers. And actually, now, if we have any hand lettering fans out there, I actually learned a really cool technique using these as well. So you can, because as I mentioned, they're self-cleaning, so you can't contaminate colors. So if you just put on a darker shade on an acrylic black, and then you take a lighter shade, like I used orange and I have a yellow here, and you just pick up just along the edge of the marker tip like that, you can actually, let me flip this over, you can actually create a really cool kind of ombre effect when you do hand lettering, and you'll see that the more you write with it, you're going to clean the marker off. So it's not going to stay orange. It's not going to stain orange. It itself cleans it.
That's really cool, and then you can get like the darker to lighter effect with just mixing the two colors on an acrylic block. Awesome. Yeah. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's really easy.
All right. Is there anything else?
I think, unless anyone has questions, I think that's pretty much the basics.
I don't see any more questions. If we happen to miss any, I know Emily is typing in the comments right now, but we'll go through and check out the comments at the end and make sure we didn't miss any, and we'll type back answers. Thanks, guys, so much for joining us. Again, these were the Spectrum Noir alcohol markers and the Spectrum Aqua markers, all available at Blitsy right now. Today's Wednesday, so we'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock Central. We're having a party.
Yes.